I'm not gonna lie, I'm looking forward to Avowed. I think Avowed looks good. I think it looks promising, and I don't see any major flags really at this point. Now, admittedly, it maybe will not be the best game ever, but I do think it's gonna be a worthwhile experience. And I know there are people who are saying, wait a minute, Avowed is a giant red flag because it started as a multiplayer game and it has been in development for multiple years, but the devs decided suddenly to make it not a multiplayer game. And I understand why some people think that that's a red flag because, it actually kind of is, right? But do not forget, there are plenty of games that started multiplayer but ended up single player because the multiplayer aspect did not work. AKA, they did not shoehorn in the multiplayer aspect with all the microtransactions and anything. So, I'm pretty excited, so let's see how it's going.
But the first game shown at the Developer Direct was also pretty cool, with Avowed. This, of course, coming from Obsidian, and we did get a release window for...
And it's Obsidian. I know Obsidian has made good things, but they also have made bad things. But as long as it's not Bethesda, I'm honestly super psyched because Bethesda just ruins everything.
Or Avowed, as it's going to be coming in fall of 2024. We get that quick one-liner on what exactly Avowed is because, honestly, I think there's been quite a bit of curiosity for a lot of Obsidian fans as Avowed has undergone several redesigns. But Avowed is described as a fantasy action RPG taking place in the Living Lands, a frontier on the edge of the known world, and you could actually see that. Lots of Avowed looks relatively desolate and really not all that built up yet. In Avowed, we are coming as an envoy of the Empire, tasked with uncovering the cause of this mysterious spiritual...
The combat doesn't look here too great, but it doesn't look that bad, honestly, also. So, it is what it is.
Plague. And from these visuals, it definitely seems like we'll be diving quite deeply into the spiritual aspect, as we can see people connected by their souls to something. But while we were
a rock. It's called the rock.
Investigating this plague, another secret at the heart of the Living Lands will come across our desk, and we're going to investigate that also. This likely being the core and bigger plot point. We'll learn it early on, and it'll really move the plot forward. Avowed's going to be a loadout-based game, which is definitely what they
Yeah, this is something that I do not like, but I don't think that this is going to be a huge problem, probably, because you have just the ability to not take this. One big problem that you can see in a lot of games like this is fast shooting and bullet sponginess. When you have an attack like this and it's small and you need to pump a million of them in a creature, that feels bad. That is admittedly something that feels bad. But everything else looks kind of meatier, bigger, not too slow, and still seems okay. Except this part right here with the wand. Kind of seems a little bit sus.
Showed the most of during this direct. As you progress your character, you'll unlock new abilities, and Obsidian wants you to have a great degree of choice here. You'll be mixing up familiar melee abilities like dashes and power attacks, but with the occasional guns, and even some magic sprinkled on top. This isn't going to be a game with a hard class structure, but instead you could switch around and mix and...
Okay, see that? That wanding actually was decent. A little bit too light in my opinion, but it has a potential at least.
Match all of your different gameplay styles. And Avowed's going to allow you to change loadouts on the fly, so you likely will tag a bunch of these abilities together and use different loadouts depending on what each combat encounter will call for. In some of this gameplay, it's almost like full-on Harry Potter, whipping out a wand to cast spells on enemies, or even dual-wielding wands at some points. But there will be
That's kind of funny.
Depth with each of these systems. These aren't traditional skills in Avowed, but instead you'll unlock special abilities you can trigger, like this magic snare we can use to hold an enemy in place, but also deeper melee mechanics like blocks and timed parries. You can see that not only with melee weapons, but with wands as well.
At least it has blood.
This little circle will appear that will likely indicate your parry chance, so you can block and counter-strike on this enemy if you want to. The Direct really focused on showing some of these ability combos, and I saw a lot of confusion online as to why it felt like there was so much combat, but I honestly think this is just a huge portion of the game and really the gameplay. From past interviews, it seems like this is really what will define your character. These combat abilities are the main unlockables you'll get from leveling up. Passive stat bonuses aren't a thing with Avowed. They describe having different types of enemies in combat to force you into some decisions, so focusing on the healer first, or bum rushing that glass cannon in the backline. But honestly, one of my biggest questions is how much depth is there really? The gameplay looks fairly simple, like you attack and then enemies...
True, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily bad. Again, as I said, I don't think this is gonna be like a super duper kind of win, but I think this is gonna be kind of fun at least. It's gonna be at least a playable experience. So, and well, It's an Obsidian game, so maybe the decision making is gonna make it really good. Fallout New Vegas's combat is pretty simplistic and dumb at sometimes. Especially if you have played a stealth sniper, got an anti-matter rifle, and used an explosive round on a Kaz door. Yeah, turns out shooting them in the head with an explosive round, not actually effective. Shooting the ground below them with an explosive round, though, ooh baby, now that activates the almonds.
Can block or dodge that, but I'm curious how interactive combat encounters really are since so many abilities are combat focused. Halfway through the game, will you just find that one perfect load?
It's probably gonna be the situation, by the way. I can already predict this, okay? The gameplay footage is kind of simplistic, but it's most likely some of the most simplistic thing that you can do. In reality, everyone's gonna just find something that feels meaty, feels big, and almost one-shots these guys, and it's gonna feel better, okay? So, it's gonna be better.
Loadout and stick to it consistently? Or will there continue to be evolution and new and unique threats that will have you changing things up, having you actually playing dynamically? Because if Avowed does suffer from that typical RPG curse where you're just a god by the mid-game once you get your build going, I can see that being a huge problem if so many of the unlockable abilities are combat focused and then you just don't really have much purpose with unlocking other abilities. But of course, this is Obsidian, so we also get a preview of a quest where we must decide what happened to some fallen soldiers and really who's to blame. We chat up a few of the soldiers and make a decision in the
lizard men, scaly bastards, or the knife-eared elves.
End. But I gotta say, these characters look pretty good. Some of the visuals in the past looked cartoony, but the characters here definitely look a lot better, although
that's a fishman, by the way.
I would say this dialogue interface looks horrible. Maybe it's just me, but I am just not a fan of any of this. I feel like the dialogue choices are in a weird position. I think the overall design is just kind of odd. Gives me tech startup vibes. But during this segment,
look at Juicy saying Avowed is bad while calling Indiana Jones like the Jewel of the North. Jesus.
They do verbally describe how quests in Avowed will have a focus on choice and consequence. And
nice.
From some recent interviews, we have heard how they opted for a smaller scale game here to have more of that. And while I am excited, I think we really need to see the scale of choice before we can determine how good this game is. The showcase ends with a focus on the world space and the visuals of Avowed, and to me, this was definitely the strangest part. On one hand, I think Avowed looks really good. This is a world I want to go explore and can definitely see the benefit.
Yeah, true. Avowed does look decent, and it makes sense. For example, look at this. This is a cave, and you have mushrooms growing in it. Not like Avatar, the whatever, blah, 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 a game where you had mushrooms growing in caves, on the ground, in the sky, and the fauna literally made flora. The flora literally made absolutely no sense at all. Here it actually makes sense. Be in cave, mushrooms that glow. It magically makes actual sense.
Fits of Unreal Engine 5 in some of these shots. At points, the world space just looks absolutely amazing, and really the vast majority of the time it does. The last time I saw Avowed, it really felt more like a cartoony game compared to what we see here, or at least mostly. Because as I was watching the showcase, I couldn't help but think that Avowed kept looking just disjointed. Like this scene almost looks cartoony, but then you immediately cut here, which almost feels hyper-realistic, like a...
Is it me, or do these two places look almost identical? I'm not seeing a disjointment in how they feel or how they look. Are you sure? Are you sure about this? Am I taking crazy pills, boys? Tell me in the comments, do you think that these places look completely different? To me it looks that there's nothing out of place. It looks fine. Oh no, maybe I'm taking crazy pills.
Unreal Engine 5 demo. I think it's most obvious in some of these creature combat encounters. I feel like we're fighting Sea of Thieves characters, but in a hyper-realistic Unreal Engine 5 landscape. It's almost like the enemies look cartoony, while the world space looks a little bit too good for that. From past interviews, we have heard...
I wouldn't say the enemies look cartoony. I mean, the cartoony graphics are defined by bright colors, first of all. this doesn't have actually that, so I don't know.
How Avowed began as Obsidian Skyrim and eventually switched directions, so perhaps this is the results of that. Part of the game was designed to be very realistic, while other parts not so much so. But overall, this new deep dive got me a lot more excited for Avowed. After the last trailer, I lost almost all of my hype, but here I think the game looks really good overall, and I'm personally more excited to play it now than I ever was in 2023. Although I am a bit disappointed by the lack of a release date. We just got fall 2024. Said it was Hellblade 2 was an interesting inclusion in the direct. It just got a huge new trailer.
Oh, people told me about Hellblade. Turns out this is... well, maybe Hellblade 2 is not going to be a disaster. Who actually knows? Visions of Mana? What the hell is that?
Just like last year, there was a surprise 5th attendee at the developer direct with Square Enix of Mana. This is dropping this summer.
Oh, is
game
this?
That is just but not a date. And frankly,
okay, I don't know about that. I think Mario has issues with these turtles. Okay, I think Nintendo's gonna come a knocking.
this is just not the type of game I'm going to be covering on this channel or even really playing.
Art History Untold.
For the game that I will likely dump the most hours into out of everything.
Oh, this is the city builder. Yeah, this is actually something that I want to play. I love city builders. If you want a survival city builder, by the way, Against the Storm, baby. Pretty hard, pretty fun, pretty... Well, I mean, I'm actually going to check how many hours I have on that bad boy. 200 hours! Yeah, Against the Storm. Really fun.
Featured at this year's Direct is Aura History Untold from Oxide Games. This too dropping in fall of 2024. We're definitely noticing a trend here. This being made by the previous developers of Civilization 5, and they're creating a historical grand...
That's kind of good.
And strategy game once again. So it's going to be one of those things where you settle.
I mean, Civ 4 is still better than Civ 5. You know what it is, boys. But at the end of the day, I'm not exactly going to be too dismissive of it. I think it's a good thing. Hey, Civ's not a bad game, even Civ 5. Civ 5 weaker than Civ 4. I like Civ 4 better, but it is what it is.
Build an empire and improve your tech over time as you go through.
First time I played Civ 4, I went for religion win against my friend. Oh yeah, bro, I was pumping out 5 missionaries a turn, and then I converted every single city into my religion. And you can probably see where I'm going with this. Turns out there is no religious victory. Yeah, kind of was slightly disappointed. Did not know that. First game, literally had no clue that doesn't exist. How can there be a culture victory and no religion victory? It makes no sense. Religion dictates culture if a religion is strong enough. It literally makes no sense.
The eras, of course with a healthy amount of resource generation and warring in between. It seems like Aura is almost following in the footsteps of something like Civ, but with a bunch of very specific change-ups to make it stand out. The world here is going to be procedurally generated, and from some of the scenes you could see pretty lifelike disbursements of different biomes and some of the features. And how you win is interesting. You win by getting the most prestige, which you will accumulate over time through warring, culture, and building monuments. So it almost looks like it's one more
Dude, this looks pretty good, I'm not gonna lie.
Dynamic victory condition. You'll earn points over the course of the game.
Well, this is a vacant video, but I mean, you know, if you... I'm gonna keep watching because I like this.
But from a variety of things, not just one defined victory style. And this sounds pretty fun to me. Like early on, you could really focus on warmongering and trying to get as many prestige points that way, but then by mid-game, you really try and advance your tech levels. But then by the end, perhaps you switch back to warring or even just shoot for a culture-styled victory. But across the entirety of the game, you are really focusing on several different victory styles instead of just shoehorning into one. And this game even has crafting, not just raising buildings, but actually crafting individual items to buff up your population. Pretty similar to how things
That's pretty cool.
Work in Banished. An Era History Untold is going to be...
Ooh, Banished! That's a name I have not heard in a long time. Banished was good, boys. Banished was good if you do not know.
Turn-based, but turns will happen in real time. Almost like...
Good, this is one of the things... Because I don't want a turn-based game. I actually want a game like this that's not turn-based. I think that would be cool.
Civ multiplayer. I'm really curious to see how this plays out in real time. It seems like a pretty cool mechanic, but it's something I really need to try for myself to understand. Overall, I'm really excited about this one, but again, it's not something I'm going to be covering much on the channel. Overall, to me, the 2024 Developer Direct was definitely weaker.
Okay, that's pretty much it in that case. Anyway, Juicy hit, boys. What a time to be avowed. It is what it is. Anyway, this was Cruiser Sid saying thanks for watching. Subscribe, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.